It's so easy to end unemployment in South Africa, so much so that it's frustrating to see that it's still growing because the government doesn't feel like they care that so many South Africans are unemployed, right? The statistics that came out that the unemployment rate has increased by I think by some few percent or 1% or something like that. The fact that it's at 33% is honestly crazy because the easiest way to create employment is to invest in entrepreneurship, in funding new businesses. That's the only way. The government has money. I don't know if it's 300 million or 600 million, whatever they invested for the 30th of June. Let's say it's 300 million. Do you know how many people that would have funded? Like, let's say the government decided out of that 300 million, I think it was 300 million, the government is going to give, let's say, for example, 600 different businesses, each 500,000. Or let's even make it more. Let's say the government is going to invest 250,000 in 1,200 businesses. Even if not all of them, I can get, even if just 100 out of that 1.2 thousand, even if just 100 of them succeed, they will contribute significantly towards employment and even the GDP of the country. Right, but that's not what the government cares about. And these funding institutions like the NYDA and the NEF and CEDA, whatever these funding institutions, um, primarily, I've gone through some of the processes. It doesn't feel like they fund startup companies. Like if you have an existing company, um, they are going to assist you, right? But it feels like these government institutions are now functioning like banks. The requirements, the purpose of funding institutions, especially for businesses, for small businesses, is especially owned by the government, is to decrease the requirements and the difficulty that is required from banks, right? But these institutions do not do that. I remember the NYDA. I applied for years ago. I applied before pre COVID. It was like a long time ago, right? I applied for funding from the NYDA, and I was like, I have a clothing brand. I want to get into the mall. So how about you pay for me rent like maybe 2 3 months ahead, and then a portion of the funding can go towards getting me stock, right? So that I can push the clothing brand inside the mall, largely because that's where my customer base is, right? It took them and obviously the cap of the NYDA. I think the grant is like 100,000, and then they have tiers like there's a point whereby they can give you 10,000. It's 10,000, it's 50,000, and it's 100,000. So it took them, I think, about 3 years or 4 years for them to give me. I requested about 50 to 100,000. It took them 3 to 4 years, and they gave me 10,000. Right, I tried to make the best of it, and then COVID destroyed any type of momentum I had. Fortunately, I studied law, so I had something to fall back on. But for me, it feels like those type of things, like how many people like me, let's say for example, hypothetically speaking, let's assume my idea was not good, like, right, let's just assume my idea was not good. There are so many people that I've met who have like incredible ideas, but because there's no guarantee of an income, they don't get funded, right? Government institutions right now, they fund concepts that are nearly 100% guaranteed. Like if you come to them and you say, I have a tender, they're going to give you money. If you come to them and say, I went to a particular shop and then they signed a contract, and then we've agreed I'm going to supply them, I just need money to do that. That's what they fund. They are not going to fund potential, right? Companies like for example Facebook, especially companies that are direct to customer, right? It feels like they mainly focus on business to business companies that startups. Maybe they fund business to business startups because in that situation they can demand, or okay, who are your customers, like can you prove that they are going to buy from you. I From where I'm standing and the experience that I've had, it seems like they fund more business to business startups as opposed to direct to customer. Let me try and elaborate on that. Direct to customer is basically what I was trying to do, right? I was going to sell directly to customers. Business to business is me having a product that I can sell to other businesses. Maybe they need it. Like, let's say business to business can be maybe an accountant who goes to different businesses and try to get them as clients, right? That's business to business. But there are other, or maybe I developed a software that I feel like certain companies would benefit from using. That's business to business. So it feels like they focus mainly on business to business, but against startups, as opposed to direct to customer. So companies or ideas or potential, the potential to create something like, for example, your Facebook, cannot happen because they don't necessarily fund anything that is a potential and not guaranteed, or okay, this is going to happen. I have a contract and it's secured, right? Maybe I don't know enough about the businesses they fund, but it doesn't feel like they support any startup, which in my based on my understanding, I understood it as their purpose to say, okay, the laws for getting a loan from a bank, which is something I don't want to do. The laws for the requirements for getting a loan from a bank are too strict. So here are government institutions that are going to make it easier for you to actually access funding in order to push or to build a company, right? If the government makes it a lot easier for startups to actually get into start operating, give startups a head start. But if they're not doing that, who's going to create employment? Like, we are all going to go to university and there's no one to hire us. Like, that's what's going to happen, and that's what's happening right now. That's why there are so many graduates without jobs. We all were told go to university and life will change. There are a lot of graduates that I know with masters, with degrees, with diplomas. They are struggling because the government doesn't really care, and I think their primary focus is on creating employees and not on creating employers, which is something I don't understand. Like, why? And I get it, education is very important, but it's to some extent it's pointless if after you graduate you're still going to struggle, right? Why aren't institutions like the NSFAS exist for business owners, someone who wants to start a business, and yet it exists for education? And I think it's only because it they are forced to do that. One thing for sure, like, it's not going to be any different. And it's honestly crazy because we there's so few taxpayers in South Africa that we end up going into debt, right? Because there's not enough money for them to steal from the country. So now we have to rent, and the country now is in debt. They have enough money to say, yeah, we're going to put aside 300 million to protect the illegal foreigners who are, by the way, classified as criminals. Anyone who comes into South Africa illegally is classified as a criminal. That's a crime. But they are going to invest money on the 30th of June. They invested money on the 30th of June, 30 million. And what happened to it? That money could have gone to businesses that today could have potentially, not even today, let's say within the next year or 2, 3 years, could have impacted unemployment significantly. But they don't care about that. They don't care about that.